All right, we're live. Justin, since it's been a while, we're going to default to you for the disclaimer and the opening.
Oh, well, thanks for that. I appreciate it.
No
Well,
problem.
good evening to everybody. We're going to be discussing a probably wide variety of topics tonight, but just as we say in every episode, like our views are not the views of the different Grand Lodges in which we hold membership. And we have LJ on tonight.
Yeah.
And do you want to introduce him or would you like me to do
Well,
that?
well yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to have you on tonight. To be 100% transparent, I believe that Freemasonry is only really as good as the mentors that you received, and I've had some awesome conversations with you in the past, and you're just one of those guys that has kind of a different outlook from most Masons. I'm really interested to dig into that. Um, he is a past master of a lodge in Southern California. I know you're heavily involved with the Scottish Rite, the Shrine, and we're really happy to have you on tonight. And I think this conversation is going to be very lively. Just to start, if you could just give us a little brief background of like how you got involved with Freemasonry, just so we have a little bit of context.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you very much for having me on. Uh, Definitely a great conversation piece, great platform and things like that. So for me, uh, coming into Freemasonry, I think it's kind of the synonymous with a lot of other people. You look for something that's unknown. I think the mind is naturally inquisitive. So for me, I kind of in speaking with a couple of you gentlemen, esotericism really drives me. That's my passion. So I was heavily involved in that, out prior to becoming a Mason. But so that kind of fueled my passion to come. But like you, I have a couple family members, a couple older gentlemen. What is that square and compass thing that I see that I can't really, mess with, stuff like that. And so, as you get older, you kind of see what they do in the community, other things like that, other organizations. And so, you always look for that thing in your life where you can kind of like, okay, let me give back in some form or fashion, whether that's your time, which is our most valuable asset, then after that followed by, material possessions or, tangible things like money, but definitely time. So, you always look for a reason to give back. And that was one of my things. I kind of, you don't really have a lot of organizations that you could say, the purpose is fulfilled in multiple facets, whether you're, you like, certain things like community relations, you like just bonding with brothers and all that. So I kind of found Freemasonry to kind of be one of those all encompassing organizations where you could kind of explore all those in one. So that's kind of pushed me. Of course, great fellowship with brothers of like-minded things, searching to be better, searching to be better. So that definitely was one of the driving forces in me becoming a Freemason.
Oh, nice.
Very
LJ, I
cool.
got a question for you. So, when
Yes,
you
sir.
how did you even find masonry? You alluded to that. You were into esoterics before. I'm kind of curious what that what you meant by that before the craft. But then, how did were you just randomly walking down the street, saw this sign for a lodge, and was like, hey, I'm gonna go check those guys out. How'd you get introduced to masonry?
Oh yeah, that's a I can make that one quick, but definitely to the point. It's kind of humorous, but I originally, like you, all you gentlemen, we served in the armed forces, mine being the Marine Corps. So basically, the monitor told me Camp Lejeune, hey, you're done. You're gonna travel out to the West Coast, California. I mean, other than it being the kind of the end of my military career, I was like, I was really against it to a degree because I was settled where I was and things like that. But it definitely propulsed my life in a different direction because, like I said, and I'll get to a trades question, of course. But on the way out here, I got stationed on Camp Pendleton, which is located in Southern California, and I met another brother, and he actually goes to my lodge, and basically, some things occurred at school where both of our sons was involved in something. It wasn't really anything major, but boys being boys. And so, he come, to see me about my son because my son is the troublemaker. And I'm like, oh, well, why you here? When he knocked on my door, great. I'm glad to see you because your son is a troublemaker. So all in all, we end up becoming friends. And he stayed, about across the street from me or around the cul-de-sac. And so with that being said, I end up starting talking to him more, open up a little more because I'm very, to a degree, very introverted, things like that. I'll talk if you get me, going or something like that. But for the most part, I'm the guy off in the corner, just, feeling the vibe, hanging out. Uh, but all in all, I started hanging out with that brother, and we started talking, and we just had some good conversations, and I was kind of leading him into things that I'm into, thought process, which at the time involved definitely esotericism, but I was giving more so an introduction, and we both found value in the conversation, and he had these banners or flags hanging in his garage, and I'm like, that reminds me. So I'm like, is this fate, or is this something that the mind just saying, hey, take a look at this? So I saw a square and compass. Of course, he had the banner for the ancient Egyptian Arabic order noble of Mrs. Shrine, as well as the consensory
Mm.
uh hanging up in his garage. And so to get to the point, what are those? So now we're kind of talking, and he fills it in, and I end up becoming he was my introduction into the lodge, as well as I still serve with that brother at that same lodge. And so that was really what kind of got me on the path. Okay, you need to go ahead and do this thing, instead of riding by like what is and stuff like that. So after that, we always look at certain coincidences, and we're like, okay, maybe I should take a look into it. And so that really what it was. We started having a conversation, and he said, of course, within our organization, we don't necessarily recruit, but long story short, we end up having some good conversations, and the things we talked about, led to me becoming, a Freemason. A
Mm.
Freemason, and being in California, just made it that much great. I ran into you fine gentlemen, and that just a continuation of my Masonic journey.
Do you think that becoming a Freemason helped you after you left the military? Like, do you think it really helped your transition? I know that it personally helped me a tremendous amount. I'm just kind of interested to hear your point of view on that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things I left off in the beginning. For me, you do, you're pretty much you're at the prime of your life from 18 to mid 30s, onto your 40s, and that's the prime of your life. And I spent that in the military. So as I begin to transition again, I'm not from California. So I'm looking for that same connection. Yeah, I'll be a retiree or a veteran, whatever you want to call it. But for me, a lot of those same brothers, we had a lot of things in common, because we were Marines, Navy, Army, Air Force serving. We're out here, kind of away from our family. So those brothers in the Marine Corps were my brothers. And as I transitioned, because I joined Masonry late into my career in the military, um, it was a natural transition. You looking for the same kind of brothers or gentlemen that share those same values in the Marine Corps. We're honor, courage, commitment, and then we get into our organization, Freemason. We're talking freedom, truth, relief, as well as faith, hope, and charity. And so when you look at that, those are a morality building blocks to make you a better person, and to build who you are. So for me, making that transition was beautiful. Coming out of the Marine Corps, and a lot of those brothers still serving. It gave me a family, within a family, or extended family from my East Coast family.
Mm.
Very cool.
And how about yourself?
Oh, for me? Oh, it was definitely, I mean, I'll be honest, like I mean, I think I became a Mason about a year or two after I retired. And, during that time, it was COVID. And, it's funny because when you leave the military, like everybody always says they're going to stay in touch, but they don't. That's just kind of how it is. Like you may exchange texts here and there, but you go from a time of where people are, you're having that face-to-face interaction with people, all the time, to really your phone doesn't ring anymore. And I was really looking for something, and I didn't really know what I was looking for, but I definitely found it, friends that are going to be lifelong. Those relationships that I made through Freemasonry are going to stand the test of time, and I've lived out of California for a while now. And, I'm still in touch and in tune to a certain degree, what was going on in the old lodge. So, I value those relationships, and I'm grateful for it, because I don't know where I would be if I didn't find that, and kind of had something to work towards, right? Like when in that time of transition, you don't really know what's next. And it gave me something to work for and to work towards. And I'm forever grateful for that, and more so for the relationships that I've gained.
Yeah.
Hey, LJ, let me ask you this, man.
Absolutely.
You have a son, you have sons, and knowing what you know now, having become a past master and achieved a lot of things in Freemasonry, what advice would you give your son or his generation joining Freemasonry right now today? The state of Freemasonry today, knowing what you know what it is, what advice would you give your son and then his peers of this generation?
That's a good
That's an
question.
awesome question. I would definitely start out by saying to tell them to look into Freemasonry, look into what, of course, the first look is going to be outward looking in. Just look at what the things that we stand for, and the gentlemen or the brothers that you see that are a part of that organization. Are they someone that you can look up to? And although, we're not looking for perfection, because we know that can't be achieved, but we can look at certain attributes from each person that we can pull, and even some bad attributes, because I always tell
Yeah.
my boys, you don't have to necessarily experience everything. You can go through other people's experiences through, by what we say, and the words kind of escaping me, vicariously, but you're living through them, and you can take certain things from their life and apply it to yours. So any gentleman or young brother, young man looking to come into Freemason, I think it's definitely an honorable institution if you look at it for, one, what it stands for, and two, are the products that are being produced by that organization. From, if you have the opportunity to see somebody from, the outside, and then they join, and then, see them a year later, if we don't really see growth, then it's like, okay, we're giving them either it's a breakdown. Either we're not giving them what they need to transverse this life, or we're not effective as far as reaching them. But I would definitely say the building blocks of what we stand for. And then I think even in the lodge, sometimes, brothers, we always talk about, the things that make us better. And I think the only thing, the key thing that is missing most of the time is the proper application of that. And
Mm.
so just teaching them, walking upright or acting by the plumb. Well, how do I apply this? Well, you look at things that you would consider to be morally upright, and you use that tool and impress that upon your mind, and now your character's changing. So that's how you make the application. So to answer Dr. Randall's question, definitely look into it. And the men that represent that organization, are they honorable men, and are they doing things that you consider honorable, and do they have those accomplishments, or is their life a product of those things, of applying the principles of that, and made them better? So, and I think that can even come from no matter what form of life. Because a lot of time, you might see somebody and you're like, hey, he's a businessman, he or this, and just because he got on a suit and tie. But it's more so it's his character line up with the
Yeah.
things that he could profess and confess that he believes in, and a part of.
Okay, so in that same vein, what advice would you give the younger you? You heard me, OJ?
Oh, he's
Oh,
breaking up.
Yeah, I was breaking up.
yeah, a little bit.
Can you hear me? We're good. You
We
good?
can hear you.
Okay.
We
What?
can't hear you, LJ.
Yeah, I thought I was coming in clear.
No, we just can't hear LJ.
Oh, I
Yeah.
got you. I got you. I got you.
Can you hear me?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
we can hear you
There we
now.
go.
Yeah. So I don't know if you heard my question. I said in that same vein, what advice would you give the
Okay, I did
younger?
it.
Yeah, what advice would you give the younger you?
Oh, that's an outstanding question. And my apologies, I had some difficulty, so I just took my headphones off.
You're
You
you're
good?
good.
But the younger you, or the younger I would say take advantage and join. If we're still talking Freemasonry, of course, I would say join it earlier. Look into it first. Ensure that that's a decision, that you want to, a road or a path you want to go down, or the things of that you want to have in your life. Because again, life is simply our experiences. So do you want that organization, or want that, um, to be a part of your life? So in essence, the younger me, I would say, look into it sooner. Make your impact, because not only that, as we're getting wiser, at the same time we look at the principle we teach, as far as, young man, old, and as how we transition, you become a little weaker physically. So, I'm able to do some of the community things, maybe give a little more. So in my youth, and also if those same tools and principles that we're talking about allows me to make better decisions in my younger years. And so some of the things I'm maybe having to recover to now, we always look at, simple examples like, you don't want to get in a lot of debt, because then when you look back, you're like, oh, if I would have just did this to prevent it. So now if I go back and look at the tools of of Freemasonry, it'll teach me to square my actions as far as my finances. So the application of tools can be applied to many things in our life. So me getting those tools or receiving those tools and understanding how to employ them could probably prevent some of the things that I'm recovering for, even man, whether that's materially or mentally as well.
Yeah, man.
Something could be said for
agree.
just the exposure to different people of all walks of life. I think that you kind of run in your own little circles when you're younger, and you don't really get exposure to people who are necessarily older than you, who have been there before and can offer you some really good life advice. I mean, I certainly wish I would have joined younger. Not for the sake of being able to say that I've been in Freemasonry longer, but just for the sake of being exposed to people from all different types of walk of life who really have some really great input that could maybe shape some things in a positive way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also too, when we're talking about speaking to our past selves, right, to give us some advice or whatnot, or the application of these tools, um, it's important to note too, like, our minds may not be ready, and still to this day, may not be ready for some of the application of those tools. So it's like one of those things that we can't be too hard on ourselves, because what brings us to today and having the mind of applying these tools is that we've grown and matured. We've had those life experiences to do that. So I think it's fascinating to be able to just kind of, I know, reflect on that and realize, like, some of these tools are, it doesn't matter where you are, it's just you start from where you're at based off of your lived experience. And sometimes we have to go through some trials and tribulations to be able to understand and fully appreciate the things that we've gone through that brought us to today. And like I say, well, I think nothing is by coincidence. The timing in which you came into Freemasonry, there's nothing you can control about that. But I do have another question. You are a co-author, right? Correct, sir, of a book?
Yeah, he tried to be shy, and
Yes, sir.
he's very
Absolutely.
Yeah,
humble, but yeah, he
yeah.
is.
So, can you talk to us about that experience of writing your book there, and um, how that came about?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a real good experience. Definitely my first. It forced me out of my comfort zone. Because now we can stand in the corner and talk a lot, but then when you actually got to put things and you're like, it's gonna be investigated, criticized and things like that, and it's only natural because the reader is interpreted the way that his thought process. So it was definitely a great experience, and it basically began during COVID. Um, a brother named Charles Smith, which we all know, and Dr. Randall and myself, came together and just basically saying, we're studious, we're qualified with the thing, and you naturally have reservations in your mind, but I think we all, sensing that the other brother excitement, we trust each other. We've had great conversations, so it was more of a something that we can embark on together and see what the finished product would be. And even with the book, it was my first, so it was more so an introduction, us giving to explain, what our thought is on the first, three steps of masonry. But at the same time, we attacked it from a couple different angles as well. Dr. Randall, he's great with history. Not only that, being just studious, in that aspect, we've all hung around him, and Charles as well. His nickname is the Professor, and how I think he obtained that prior to coming to our lodge in California. So for him to even have that nickname, that meant that the brother was well read or understood just knowledge and information and being able to process that and relay that information to the reader. And so we met a couple of times on Zoom, and we kind of got our plan of attack together, and we started, saying who would do this. So we started iron out a lot of the details and try to put order to something that one, again, I never done. But then we attacked it again from different angles. So, I like to go, we spoke on this a couple of times, esoteric and Brother Smith, does well. He has his own angle. So what we did, we was explaining, our experience of what we received from those degrees. Now, mind you, we're looking back to that time, because now, like you said, we've kind of grown and matured into things, and now we're kind of analyzing our walk from that first, second, and third, and understanding one, that you're never obtained, truth, but searching for truth. But if you're saying you're searching for truth, then you have to be. That's going to be a continuous thing. Our mind is minuscule considering the macroism of the universe. Just in size comparison. So we just we limited to a couple pages each, and we're giving our experiences. So which even that process was kind of difficult because you got all these thoughts and you're trying to compress them into this, and and follow the guidelines so we have a balanced presentation to give, and where people don't necessarily get bogged down, because sometimes you'll read something, it might grab you right away, and you might pick it up years later, look back, oh man, why did I even put this book down? This book is awesome, but you matured in it. So that was us basically evolving as Masons, and we kind of did that. So that was a thing, and then we put it on Amazon. And it was a couple of different places as well. And then brothers, kind of gravitated and gave some feedback, and the feedback we got, we felt like we did, due diligence and justice to our project and our presentation. So it was definitely a great experience.
Yeah. So as we look back at that, because that was almost 5 years ago now, and it's crazy how fast that time has gone.
Yeah.
And I was telling these brothers that we kind of did it as a conversation, kind of a joke, and then it just happened. So as I look, and I've never got a chance to ask you this, when we were talking about the fellowcraft degree, you had this specific example of the spiral staircase, and I just want you to explain that analogy that you use for the spiral staircase, the winding staircase in the second degree. What was that analogy you used?
Okay. I'm actually kind of drawing a blank right now.
Well, remember,
Man,
we talked
what
we
did I
talked about
write?
trust. We talked about it was indicative of trust, and that's always stuck with
Oh,
me as I went back and read the manuscript, and I read it about 2 or 3 times, and I was like, man, that is such a profound. It's a simple word, but it's so profound in how it falls out. So I just kind of wanted you to explain what was your thought process when you were writing that.
yeah, absolutely. That kind of sparked, something kind of refreshed me a little bit. And honestly, it was a thought that I came from reading the book. I can't necessarily call the book at the time, but of course, I put my interpretation on that. But it's something that always stuck with me. Is like, if it's a staircase, we talk about the number of stairs that we use within Freemasonry. But if you think about it, that's just an analogy to kind of get some to compress the ideas to to impress on our mind the things that the book trying to relate. But when you're looking at a staircase, especially a winding staircase, as you're traveling upward into this knowledge or this light that you're searching for, you're basically trusting your mind that it'll lead you in a certain way to where you're going to get something that's fruitful out of, whatever search you're on, because it's the thing like desire, or we've been taught that desire is a bad thing. But honestly, you're just, in a sense, quenching that thirst or satisfying that hunger or whatever it is. But as you go up those stairs, it's winding. So you necessarily can't see what's around every bend and if you think of one more like like a firehouse that we see on TV or something, those stairs are real tight and compressed. And so it's kind of like when you get on that journey, nobody can go past you. They can't come from behind you or come for you, so you're kind of stuck in this lane. But the thing is, it's just that's your quest to go where you're already where you're already trying to go to solve the answers or get the answers to the questions that you have about this life experience. So for me, the winding staircase just represents that is you trust in yourself that it's gonna your mind and your higher power that you look up to and that you speak with, that they're gonna put you on the right path of your life. And so you're trusting it to make those decisions, and all is head down, and you're just going until you kind of either reach that destination, or you just stop where you are and wonder why you're in your place that you're at right now.
Mm. That's deep.
That book was tremendous. That was actually the first thing that I read after I received the third degree. And, obviously I enjoyed that part that you wrote, but the one that had the most impact for me was Professor, Charles Smith, like when he talked about the lost word, right? And like what that meant, because I think,
Mhm.
I think a lot of guys get raised that have no idea what that means, like what are we searching for? So, man, and this might be, I don't know where you guys want to take the conversation, but that might be a good, speaking of the lost word and speaking of finding more light, like, can you tell me a little bit about the Scottish Rite and how that kind of ties in a little bit? Because I'm very interested in this topic, mainly because I have petitioned the Scottish Rite. I'm starting in April.
Well,
But
that conversation we just had in the lodge, LJ, I think would be
Yeah.
very apropos to answer Justin's
yeah,
question. Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. For me, and I think, I think that's even I heard something that Dr. Randall said on one of his other podcasts that I began listening to yesterday. And I think, for me, being, entered, past, raised in the Blue Lodge, when you start talking about, okay, what's next, more light and masonry, for me, it was a Scottish Rite. And honestly, looking back on that, the gentleman that said, go this route or that route, I think at that junction, and again, I'm not in New York, right? I'm on the Scottish side. At that junction, I think honestly we should spend a little more time with those brothers who searching for more light, especially when you're talking, time and things like that. And we know that the Scottish has this side, New York has this side, and so and allow that, in a sense, because although we get into the conversation of, is it a college of masonry, just things like that, most of the brothers don't get that till later. Somebody say, hey, why did you do that, or whatever, and they're kind of wondering, which way they could have went. But to sum up what I'm saying is, when you look at, what each one serves or the purpose it serves, for me, I chose the Scottish more so because I think it introduces the universality of masonry. And when you start looking, especially to some of your higher degrees, not even really your higher degrees, but when you start going from the fourth and you go all the way up, through the degrees, it introduces a lot of things that I think you can pull from, and it kind of lines up with more with esotericism. But not only that, for me, it lines up more with a broader outlook on life. And again, I don't want to speak ignorant of the York Rite because I'm definitely not in there. And one, I don't believe that being like you gentlemen be a study man, ignorance is one of the biggest things. So I want to be careful with that. But for me, looking out, I saw the York as more of one of the sides that was more on the religious side for me. And again, this is strictly my opinion, and of course, you gentlemen can correct me. But when the Scottish Rite, for me, when I get up there and I'm start looking at certain things like the passwords or the watchwords, and there's a difference in the languages. I'm gonna keep it kind of broad, definitely make sure we don't, we
yeah,
don't trample on our fraternity. But when I looked at it, I saw the mixture of different words, which shown that was a mixture of different beliefs or thoughts around the world, if that makes sense to you. So you start to look, and when you get into some of the degrees and you start talking Gnosticism, then you have your Christian mystics, you have your sages, you have your magi. Then you start getting into the Hindu with Sanskrit, and things like that. And so you start looking at even some simple as the yin and a yang. And so for me, it was able to get me brought out because I'm naturally inquisitive like that anyway. And I felt like, even within Mason, how we say, we let brothers, as long as you believe, we don't say what you have to believe, but we ask that you believe or require that you believe in something higher than yourself. And, we can get into semantics or and syntax, of and etymology of what words mean and stuff like that. But for the most part, we're talking about what do you look for as being, where did all this come from? So if we keep it vague like that, for me, I enjoy the Scottish because it gives an introduction to a lot of those things, which you can simply, now that we're talking Scottish Rite, this is for me, or any brother that might be at that junction. I just felt like it was more of a secular thing that can be pursued, and I can learn from different angles. Like even, I think even just something simple as understanding why other people believe certain things religious wise. And so I felt like the Scottish, because it mix a lot of that in there to a degree, it gives you an introduction. So if you like Gnosticism, you like Rosicrucian, things like that are, originally what we would call, because a lot of people get confused with the word like a cult. A cult is definitely not a bad word, but we've ruined the word because we don't. And like Dr. Rounder, he's big on etymology. I love etymology of words. So we think things that are evil, which is really not, is just it ties into evil because it's the fear of the unknown. So that fear is kind of synonymous with evil, a horror movie. Oh, fear. So whatever's after me is evil, but it's not. It's really just the same thing. Esoteric and exoteric is really just how even us, we come in the natural quarry of our life. and we introduce you to these things, and you're like, aha, now the bulb come on. And so esoteric and occult just mean hidden. That's all it means. It just means hidden. And so now the inquisitive mind wants to know what started all this. And so man develops geometry and things like that to measure the stars and to measure that. So in the Scottish Rite as well, you start getting into astronomy, astrology, which is really not just Scottish Rite, because we're taught this in the fellowcraft degree to begin with grammar and rhetoric and work our way up to astronomy. And then you will start to see the mysteries of the universe open. And so just to go back to that junction in a road with the York, for me, I grew up very religious, in all my life. I was, I hope my mom not listening, but I was forced Baptist, stuff like that. So spending all day in church and things like that. But
Oh,
and that's not to
she
knock
heard
any
you.
man's faith, because I'm very right. I'm very careful not to trample on any of my brothers' one religion or faith, as well as but for me, I want to see the broader aspect of why do certain people believe certain things, and then you'll really start to believe that a lot of the things that is considered pagan at its roots, if you go back and look, they were actually more advanced than we are today. So going back to that, and the Scottish Rite involves you start to get into your numerology and things like that, and you'll start to see a structure of things that's built, and it's like, even in 1 hour lecture, you say it's talks about numerous worlds are all around us, all formed by the same divine artists that roll through the expanse. So now we're talking outer space. So we're talking universe. So we kind of getting a whole picture of the things that we see on a daily basis. So for me, the Scottish just intrigued me more. And again, I'm careful to not to trample on anybody's faith or what they believe in, because that's their road, that's their path in life. But I would encourage them to, study something that you're anti against. Just take a quick look at it and see. And then sometimes you might see something that really you were just ignorant to. And again, ignorant is not a bad word. You were just ignorant to it. I mean, you were just, you was void of it. You didn't have the information. So sometimes we make decisions based on stuff that we shouldn't, because we don't have an idea what we're talking about. So for me, Scott is just, was easier. I gravitated to it. I really enjoyed it. And so I'm not quick, and I'll stop at this point, but and for me, when I went for the blues, I took a break. I didn't jump right into the Scottish Rite, and as well as the shrine as well. I kind of wanted to get a good understanding and study it. I didn't knock anybody else that jumped on the next thing. That's their path. But for me, I needed time to kind of process. Then I say, you know what? Let me go this way. And I think just having a more informed, more information, you can make a better informed decision. That's all.
Well, I mean, let me just add this really quick. So you talked extensively about the universality of the Scottish Rite Masonry and Masonry in general, but then that's indicative of the double-headed ego, which denotes the universality looking east and west, right? And then we look at
Yeah,
how are the lodges situated, east and west, right? So that denotes the universality,
right.
but the broadness, right? Because there's no definitive distance between east and west, right? And the Bible, God says, as far as the east is from the west, so your thoughts are my thoughts. So then we start to think about things outside of, you talked about going into space, right? We start to think about things further than when Justin was talking about the lost world. We think about it beyond the realm of what we can fathom. And remember,
Right.
at the official visit, one of the things that I denoted was, and we don't practice it enough, was the 21st landmark, talking about the universality of the different religions. Because in Masonry it says you just have to believe in a deity, which is
Yep.
just a supreme being. It doesn't say you have to believe in God or Christian faith or Hinduism or whatever. Right? You just have to believe in a deity, which is a higher being. But your Allah, your God, is different from my God potentially, but it's as long as you believe in a supreme being. But we don't teach those landmarks, which give us a foundation that help us make informed decisions as we go into these different houses, right? And if we start to do that with brothers, then we can get away from this. Oh, you should go this way or that way, because that's a personal preference, not a requirement written anywhere. So I just wanted to add that
Right.
context.
Do you guys think that
And if I could add something to that,
go
go
ahead?
ahead, Justin. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead, man.
Oh, and even to add to Dr. Randall said, when you're talking the universality of masonry, I think honestly at its true essence, because when you look at the early, the whether legend, tall tales, or if that was true history, inflated or anything, however you want to say, the past or the history of Freemasonry, when you look at it at certain things, when you think logically, you say, well, a lot of these brothers didn't really have a lot, and they were able to travel. And then when you think of certain things like how long does it build certain things, and of course we know those are parables to teach us things, just like in the Bible. But when you look at certain things, I truly believe that, a lot of the things about traveling is really expanding the mind. So if you think about that, we say we're traveling men. Sometimes traveling is because your mind and your imagination, if you read a good book, can put you in that setting. We would talk that as children. That's why young kids are taught to look at the Marvel, look at the comics. And a lot of times we're like, man, these kids are just nerdy or they're just this. But when you think about it, imagination is so powerful. You're reading a book. So if I'm reading a book on what Freemasons do in India, now you can say, I'm traveling, because that's technically traveling. So I think even the early parts of Freemasonry, if you didn't have the money and finance to travel, you could study certain books and how they conduct their things, and you'll start to realize, like, something simple as, like, we refer to our our grand architect of the universe. We leave that broad, in a sense, to let that person does that. Sometimes we might make a mistake, and somebody, whoever speaking, might just mention theirs, which is really, no, as long as they're not really taken from another person. But when you look at it, we'll say that's the light. Well, when you look at something simple as the Egyptian culture, Cometicism, I love Cometicism because when you look at something simple as, I think it's the atomic table, which is I think number is 5079, but it's AU. Well, if you study Egyptian culture, you hear of Osiris, Horus, and Isis. But if you look at their original Kemetic name, they were Asar, Aset, and Heru. And so the first word of Asar is AU, and that just means light. So they're saying that if they look to the east instead of the letter G, maybe they will have AU, but it's the same thing. And so when we study and we look at those things, now I've somewhat traveled to Egypt in my mind, and I'm able to say, so they were similar, they were doing certain things similar to me. I'm just doing maybe a version of where I am, but it's the same thing. And I think that in our minds allow us to travel. So not to say that we don't just visit, but what's the purpose of just only visiting brothers that think exactly like you? If I'm gonna go to your lodge, of course you want to see the brotherhood, don't get me wrong, but I think fellowshipping with a brother that's of a different faith or a different nationality, just to see how they're doing, you'll really realize, man, we got a lot of things in common. So we are on the same expedition. We are the same, looking for the same, lost word. Even in the York, you guys, I'm not in York, but on the Scottish Rite, you can find the word, but it's more of a self-discovery. And once you get it, you'll be just like Pythagoras. You'll have your eureka moment, and you're like, this is crazy. But the joy of finding it, or the wealth of that search and that thing. And I think, again, last point, I think sometimes we look for the end result when we don't enjoy the actual moment. So while we're fellowshipping with our brothers and things like that, looking for the lost word or whatever, you enjoy where you're at that time. And so whatever position you are or who you fellowship with, if they're building you up, that's a great experience. And I think that's what it's about.
That's deep. We had.
Do you
Go ahead.
go ahead, Trey?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you think that membership in the Scottish Rite has really enriched your experience in the Blue Lodge? Like, I guess this is for you and Dr. Randall as well. Like, do you think that through that education, you really look at things a little bit differently, or maybe you have a couple more aha moments?
I'll defer
Oh,
to
for me, I'll
her.
go quick because I want to hear Dr. Randall as well, because he's a very studious brother. But for me, it's definitely my part. I didn't mean to jump anybody.
No, good.
But I think
Good.
for me, when you look at it, just like we're told, a lot of people think, oh, the higher the number don't necessarily mean you're in a higher degree or a higher position, because we know that the third degree is the highest. That's the apex. But in a sense, all it does, remember, this, whether it's Scottish or the right, it should shine more light on those very basic things that you received in the blue light. So I think it's definitely an extension, and just more light is just exactly that.
Yeah, I think I'll just echo that. It is just that. It's just more light. But just for context, as we think about Scottish Rite, because I think people get dismayed with the number 33 and 33rd degree, and everybody wants to come to Scottish Rite Mason to be a 33rd degree Mason or a Grand Inspector or General. But I always say this: you can't get to step 33 without step one, right? And LJ said that the 3 degrees are the highest.
Salute.
They are the apex. But Scottish Rite does give you a rich insight on the symbolic lodge and the historical account of what actually happened, not only to Hiram Abiff, but the inner workings of King Solomon's Temple. It's all throughout the Scottish Rite, from the different dependent bodies, right? From the Lodge of Perfection all the way up through, the consistory, even Rose Croix. and then the nice kadash. So there's a lot of esoteric learning, and there's a lot of deep, rich learning that I learned more in the Scottish Rite. Now I could equate. I've learned just as much on the York Rite side, but they balanced out. They balanced out, and I'd be very honest and very open about that. So it just no real profound thought other than it definitely enriches your understanding of masonry, right? Because knowledge is obtained by degrees. Wisdom dwells in contemplation, and there we must seek her. And as I think about seeking her, and I always talk about the historical account of the Scottish Rite. The Scottish Rite only started off with 25 degrees originally, and then we gotta
Right.
understand the history,
Right.
right? Because I always say you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you came from. So if you don't know how the Scottish Rite degrees even got to the United States, then you're lost. You got to start there. So that's my take on it.
Very cool. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The last week we had our last episode, we had Brother Damian Jack on here, right? And one thing he said kind of resonated with me. You know, he says we all meet on the level, but maybe not just maybe we're on different levels, right? But we're on the level, but we meet on different levels, right? And to me, this conversation kind of alludes to that in the sense of, well, you know, it anybody can go and get a degree, right? You can go and get a degree, whether that be in academia or in masonry, whatever. That doesn't necessarily mean that you understood what it is that you are, the application of what it is that you studied, right? So I can go get a business degree,
Mhm.
take the test, pass the test, but I have no real experience, with those tools, applying those tools. I kind of lend the same thing with masonry as I kind of see and I travel to, different bodies and different lodges. Is that, yeah, there's a lot of brothers who got different degrees and this house and that house and whatever, but you run into a few that actually apply those things, right, and can speak about it practically and bring it to life from the sense of like understanding the esoteric uh, symbolism behind what it is that is being conveyed. And I'm curious to think or to what you all have to say on this is like, how do we how do we get more brothers to engage in that and if that's even possible, right? Because I don't think that everyone has a mind for this kind of understanding of the craft or even just anything really outside of masonry. I hope my answer or my question is kind of open enough to be able to answer that. So let me recap. So how do we think? Yeah, I got to do it in my mind. So how do we think? You can, yeah. You can see me just going through it, right? Because it's fascinating, right? Like I'm thinking about this as a problem, not a problem set, but like we got to understand like everybody doesn't care about knowledge to this degree. Everyone doesn't approach studying life and this journey to this point. It's kind of just like living in it, right, and not really trying to understand or even recognize it. To me, it's recognizing the beauty in it, recognizing the beauty in the symbolism of what it is that's happening to you, whether you choose to study it or not, if that makes sense. So how do you think this is a weak point in masonry? That's the question.
Mm.
I'm gonna defer to LJ, but I'm just gonna refer back to what he said earlier, and I'll let him speak for himself. Where he talked about utilizing those working tools and utilizing masonry to be better men, and I just want to kind of leave that there and set the stage for him to answer your question.
Yeah. Definitely. I think that that's the one of the missing things that we don't understand or that we don't really grasp. We recite the working tools and we do get a good introduction into them. Don't get me wrong. I think again, I think the maybe the disconnect, and it's not for everybody, but the overall disconnect is probably the application of it. I'll tell you something, just a quick analogy, like even for me, the application of those tools and the application like uh some simple as like our modes of recognition or certain I'm a lot lost for words for a minute, but how we, how we might utilize our hands when we're making certain signs and things like that. Well, for me, when I was at the actual worship master, I would do certain, signs or symbols facing a certain direction during my meditation. So now when I'm trying to put my trestle board together, I take that time to now I'm applying the things like, again, kind of like the Scottish, right? I say, because you get your introduction like Sanskrit and things like this, and you understand that yoga and things like that is beneficial for the physical body. Meditation is good for the mental, part of your body. So I think sometimes we try to confine and we like, well, I'm not necessarily going to lay out and do a protractor on my day, but we take those tools like some simple as a trestle board. Now the trestle board is in our phone, just a calendar. You're making a trestle board of your goals, your aspirations, your date. How do I feel all my time? Because I mean, like, probably like you guys, we go and we do 8 hours for whoever or another, unless you work for yourself or another corporation. And that's no knock to the 9 to 5. I'm actually in a 9 to 5, so I don't want to be like that. But you're going to give it to whatever you are. But now you're using that 24 gauge to measure those times throughout the day, where you can take this time to focus definitely on you. It's broken down into certain things where we know of how we take it, and it's applied to those 3 times that we break it up to address the physical, the spiritual, and the natural man. So I think you can even break that, let's just say, for example, it's 7 or 8 hours. Let's just take 8 hours. And you break that and you say, okay, out of this part of my 8 hours, I can take at least 1 hour and do something for my mental health. And then I can take another hour to plan out my month, because I got to do things with the family. I got to do things to support my lodge. I want to give back to a charity. So I think actually taking some of them and actually literally using them, and then some of it is it can be esoteric, or it can be a spiritual, or a way that as a Freemason I would apply it. So you might take that time to learn something new about the fraternity that you've given yourself to, and once you start to balance that, I think that's the true application of it, to where you can be proficient with it. Because like we all know, we always talk about how we're a continual, we're always a fellow craft. And and Dr. Randall, and I'm gonna stop after this, but Dr. Randall even spoke about it. He talked about, sometimes you attain certain ranks and you think that, just because you got it's that, but it's that proper application of that. And not only that, when you obtain that, but if you learn how to do certain things, I'm quick to not be like I'm a master. Yeah, it's good and title to say, I'm a master mason, but honestly, if I'm truly studying this thing in this craft, then I'm far from a master. You know what I'm saying? But it's a good title to have, things like that. But being proficient with those tools, so definitely I would say, taking those literal and spiritual and apply those to your life. And I think if you do that, you'll just have a more fruitful experience here on earth, or whatever you're doing.
Yeah, I know I'm pretty big on when you get these degrees, and I've told every brother that's in my purview this: if you get a degree and go through the degree, you should be able to explain what you just went through. And if you can't explain what you just went through, then you're ineffective and you shouldn't be doing whatever it is that you're doing, right? I also segue that to say that these positions, as you go higher and higher and ascend higher and higher in Maestry, these are leadership positions. Just because we put people in leadership positions, it doesn't make them leaders. So this is the part of the show where it gets a little spicy now, because this kind of leads into my question, because I want to kind of throw some gasoline on the fire. You mentioned the word brother about 8 or 9 times. And as I think about the Bible verse that I shared yesterday, which came out of Proverbs 17:17, it says, "A friend is always loyal, and a brother is born to help in a time of need." So, in your opinion, what does the word brother mean to you? Because the word brother is misused in masonry right now. Let's just be honest. Let's just be just completely honest, right? And completely raw. The word brother is misused. So, what does it mean
Yeah,
to you?
to me, you know,
Go ahead, man.
okay.
Yeah.
Uh, I've been taking. Go ahead, Justin. I'm definitely. I want to hear some of your thoughts
Yeah,
as well, sir.
I quickly want to touch on what Trey, your question real quick. And I think that with and I will get to your question as well, but I think early exposure to the deeper meanings behind masonry is critical, right? And Raul kind of talked about it. Like, if you can't explain it, then you don't know it. But equally as important, I think you need to have a mentor, right? Because I can honestly say here tonight that if it wasn't for LJ and it wasn't for Rule, I would not be interested in esoteric masonry. I would not have been exposed to it. So I think that some guys are naturally inquisitive and are going to want to ask questions and find answers, and some guys just aren't. And I think those guys, it's fine, right? Like if you came to Freemasonry to have friends, hey man, that's cool. You came to Freemasonry to give back to your community in a positive way, great man. You're my brother, right? Um, but when I look, I actually recently did an investigation on a guy that's petitioning our lodge. And, the main question I always ask myself is like, if I was in extreme distress and I needed you to come to my house and take care of my family or take care of my house or, do something that a normal friend wouldn't, like, could I depend on you to do that? And I think that's really where the line is drawn between just having a friend and having a true brother, because I know all three of you, like if if I needed you to come to my house and take care of something at my house, or I needed you to pick my wife up or something that was, kind of drastic or an emergency, it'd be no questions asked, and I would when Trey would come over to my house when I lived in California, and he would knock on the door. I'd be like, dude, what do you knock on the door for? Just come in. My wife knows you, my kids know you. Like you spent a lot of time here. Like that's the kind of relationship that we have. Friends don't knock, brothers don't knock on the door. They just walk right in. So that is my definition of a brother. And also the other big part of that, this kind of goes into the obligations a little bit, but like, can I tell you something in the utmost confidence and that will be protected and guarded? Those are all things that I look at when we're looking to bring somebody new in, and also someone to an affiliate too. We had a bunch of guys affiliating with our lodge too. Like, I don't know you from Adam. Yeah, you're a Mason. That's great. But I want to get to know you. And those are the questions I kind of ask myself as we go through that process. And if the answer is yes, then yes, you are my brother. But I have but to be fair, like there are brothers in my lodge that I would not trust to do that, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that I don't like them, but there are guys that have higher levels of trust than others.
Yeah, I think you said something there, Justin, that just made sense. There's certain brothers or certain people that you can trust, right? To be around, your family, whatever. And I think the same it can be said about, in life. There are people that you can trust, but there's others you can't. And I think that alludes to what I said earlier, and what kind of what Brother Damian Jack said is like we all meet on the level. We're just not on the same level. We're all brothers, but we're not the same kind of brother to that, because we're at different we're at different stages in our life and in our growth, in which we understand the definition of a brother and what that means. But to Dr. Raul's point, going back to Proverbs 17:17, is a friend's love. I'm sorry, a friend loves at all times, but a brother is born for adversity. So to me, that tells me that like there's certain, and there has to be some kind of conflict, right, in order for me to be able to identify who a true brother is, right? There has to be a need or a desire for help, for me to be able to determine what a true brother is. Because yeah, to Dr. Raul's point, like we use that term loosely throughout our lodges, and really throughout life. I catch myself sometimes too, and just kind of my job. Hey, what's up, brother? How you doing? This, that, and the other. But they're not really my brothers. It's a sense of like we use it in the sense of a point of reference, or a point of commonality between ourselves. We are brothers of the human race, whatever you want to say. But yeah, a brother is born out of adversity, truly, and you won't know until you know, if that makes sense. So
it makes total sense.
Yeah.
And you know what, like, it's funny because before Freemasonry, people would call me brother. I'd be like, yeah, or bro me or whatever. But now that I am a Freemason, a non-Freemason calling me brother, it bothers the crap out of me. Like it really does. And it shouldn't, right? That's super silly. But it's like, you're not my brother. Like, I don't know you from Adam.
Yeah.
I think it has a whole different context now, right? It means something now. So anyway, interesting fact.
But LJ, what do you think? What do you think about
Oh, I,
brother?
I definitely
Yes,
agree
sir.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely agree with everything you guys said. Was spot on in my opinion. Like you said, a brother's born out of adversity, and I think that can even be summed up to certain life experiences. And because of adversity, we don't know to what degree. We just know it's adversity. So it could just be something simple as, "Hey, I went through that as well." Maybe not at the same time, but at the same time. Or did you guys go through something? You look at bonds that people build in some simple as combat, or people from different walks of life, and they had a shared experience. And now you're adding that shared experience, and this includes a lot of adversity, so they overcome by the strength of one another or the bonds that they built. And even like kind of how you said, he said, uh putting together what you and Dr. Randall said, he said that sticks closer than your brother. But even take that to just regular experiences. Just say you go to an event and it's full of other Masons, but you might not know anybody else. So your thing is to find one, locate somebody that because you got the familiarity with them, and you're gonna let's work this crowd together, instead of and I know that's a simple analogy, but you go somewhere where you're not known, that's kind of uncomfortable. But if you find another buddy's like, "Oh, Justin, I'm in Miss," we meet up somewhere, and I'm like, "I don't know anybody here." You like me either. At least we got each other, So I think
Right.
that analogy, goes with what both of y'all said. Somebody that's closer to you because you had a shared experiences, and now y'all can transverse that adversity together, or that experience together.
Yeah. It brings me back to just, Justin and I as cables, right? Like our initial, I guess adversity, right, is having to learn that OB and this, that, and the other, right? And the going through that process together made us, closer than most other brothers, who may be in the lodge. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm curious, how how do we I guess broaden that scope, right? Broaden that scope within the confines of our lodges, if that makes sense. How do we make more brothers?
Are you meaning like getting closer as brothers within the lodge?
Correct.
Yes. And this is where it's going to get a little spicy for me, but like I think some lodges are hyper focused on things that aren't Freemasonry. That's my personal opinion. They're hyper focused on community service, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but if that's your only thing, right, then are you a Masonic lodge, or are you just another charitable organization? It's kind of food for thought. The other side of that is like too much focus on ritual, right? Where you are so intent on getting it right and getting it perfect and putting on a show when you don't necessarily know what you're talking about, right? You don't know what it means. You can just regurgitate it. I think when a lodge gets hyper focused in one area or another, and they forget that key thing, that this is a fraternity, right? Like, we are supposed to hang out together. Like, we are supposed to be close. We're supposed to have friendly intercourse and relationships. It's not just about showing up to lodge once a month and doing that. It's about hanging out outside. And that's something I'm really trying to do in my lodge. Like, these guys don't hang out outside of like stated meetings, and they think stated meeting dinners are like, that is our quote unquote friendship. Well, dude, I don't know you. You never been to my house. You never met my wife. So I'm making it a point to be like, we need to hang out. Like, we need to hang out outside of the lodge so that we can really get to know each other, right? So that you aren't just a guy that I call brother. I can actually call you my brother. If that
Yeah,
makes
let's
sense.
let's plate this up a little bit because all you guys are hitting on it. It's the culture, right? Each lodge establishes a different culture, and
Yep.
if you establish a certain culture, if we go back to what LJ was saying when he was talking about sitting different angles and preparing his trestle board as a worship master, you establish that culture of the lodge. And this is what I tell the district deputies: you guys are the culture setters. The worship masters are the culture setters. So you have to instill a certain culture in each lodge and demand that that culture be adhered to. Right, that's a cultural difference. Peter Drucker, the father of modern business, says culture eats strategy for breakfast. And as I think about that statement, right? The culture is more important than strategy. Trusted board is a strategy, but what's the culture? The culture defines every organization, and if you have a strong culture, consequently, if you have a strong lodge and a good culture within that lodge, then your lodge protrudes out. But each leader, going back to that, knows the strengths and weaknesses of the brothers in their lives. It may be a brother that is community service focused, so I'm going to put him in charge of community service relations, right? It may be another brother that's good with raising money, then I'm going to put him in charge of fundraising. It may be another brother that's good with combrowse and good with the whole parties and getting people the synergy, right? I'm going to put him in charge of that. But again, utilizing all of these pieces to establish a culture. It's just a culture.
Hmm.
Yeah, that. Hey, that was a great analysis. You kind of got me excited a little bit. And just because I like analogies and just examples. But even though the trestle board, in Mason we talk about trestle board, and you get it in mind the Masonic checkerboard. But at the same time, if you realize that same thing is that it's employed not only just by definitely the worship master, like you said, for the analogy we used earlier, but even as a master mason, I think you employ people because sometimes a lot of times we get in positions that we really didn't want. Like, hey man, can you do this? And you're like, yeah, I can, but that person not really passionate about. So you might get a good product or you might not. But if you find those guys that are good in those specific areas and employ them again using your trestle board, it's just a chess piece. Everybody want to be the king, in a sense, but then when you realize that's not the most powerful chess piece, or it's not the most powerful at a time because it's limited by certain movements or certain things. It can't move as freely as one. So if you get those brothers like Dr. Randall said, if you get those guys that love the community service, go ahead and let him be in charge of that. The officers or whoever, they'll have oversight and just make sure everything's flowing good. But put one of those brothers, and then you'll get that I think you'll get that excitement back in the lodge, and you have the guys who really love the ritual. Let them be the head, and then all the other guys kind of just support him. And so then you'll have different people, and and you have them in those specific places and points on your trestle board throughout the year, with those individuals taking the lead of that, and then the whole lodge is a better experience. And then I think it'll kind of minimize the people doing things that they don't want to do because the passion won't be there. And that's one thing I'm big on. When I used to tell, candidates come through, they get raised or whatever, I said, find what you're passionate about in there and let that be your driving focus. And then, but that's not to say to negate everything else. Just, step in there and see if you're into it. If you're not, cool. But if we have everybody doing a little, you don't have brothers getting burnt out because when you're passionate about something, you're just gonna, that's natural. You're just gonna be, you looking for that endorphin release and stuff like that. And I think that right there stimulates not only that person in the mind, but it also going to stimulate growth in your lodge as well. Because they can go out and when you have, because just think if we're out doing a community relation, the guy that's leading it, he run into another guy. He's like, I love this. And he said, oh, you guys do that? What's your organization? And say, this is what we're built around, like-minded this, and we do this stuff. Then now you have somebody, and although they might initially come in as that, you can form them and put them in their place to where they're effective with your lodge once they get up and running as well. So I think it's all a trestle board. It's a think piece and definitely you know
Yeah.
kind of got lost at the end there, but it's definitely some that can make your lodge a better product, I believe.
No, you didn't get lost. I'm tracking all
Yeah,
the
I'm
way.
with you.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm getting excited because it's like these are the conversations that to me that matter, right? Is a conversation of understanding, of empathy, right, of where people are at, and kind of our own little trestle board, our own little think tank about how can we get more involvement and engagement on the different facets or the different niches in masonry, and it's always good to brainstorm those things for lack of better terms. But I think that somebody somewhere listening is probably going to get an idea from this, and or really just get confirmation of what it is that they thought, to understand like, hey, you're good where you're at. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. But here's something to get you excited. It's a tactic to employ, or a strategy to employ. But like Dr. Raul said, hey, what is that? What'd you say? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it's
Correct.
about the
Yeah.
culture. You got to create that
Yeah,
culture.
Yeah. So I mean,
yeah,
it's just
absolutely.
the whole intent of the trestle board talking. I know we didn't get into it in the beginning. The whole intent, Trey, Justin, myself thought about it. There's brothers that think like we do, but they don't have the platform
Hmm.
to say it. We just wanted to give brothers a voice. right? Because we're speaking vicariously through the other brothers in our jurisdictions, multiple jurisdictions, and giving them a platform, and letting them hear things that they were thinking, but nobody in positions of whatever they perceive as power have said it, right? So it was just it just wanted to kind of think about that. I don't know what that was all about.
That was classic.
No, that was great. Hey, it was good. It was good. And
That was that
perfect
eureka
timing.
aha
Yeah,
moment.
That was the aha,
yeah,
right? No, but it's
yeah. It was
just
good.
yeah. For context, we think about that. We wanted to give brothers a platform, right? And the intent of this is for people to like, share, and subscribe. And this is to grow and grow and grow. We get more brothers like yourself, like-minded brothers on here to just share their experience in masonry. And then there's some brothers out there that may even want to join masonry that hear this and understand, oh, just like when we wrote Masonry Inside Out, we wrote it from, we said we want to
Right.
have inside perspective with the outside world looking in, right? So that was the intent of that
Yeah.
book. And the same thing with the Trust Board Talks, inside thoughts, right? With the outside world looking in to get perspective. So, I mean,
Yeah.
yes,
Absolutely.
it's definitely been a pleasure having you, man. I don't necessarily have any more questions. I know Trey always got one or two parting shots.
Hey,
Go ahead with it.
no, I will subdue my question this go round, but no, I'm very appreciative. I'll say this: I'm very appreciative of you coming on. I think that not a lot of people have the courage to come on any kind of platform. And speak their mind, because it's like writing the book, right? You're subjecting yourselves to outside criticism, as we have just on this podcast as well. But I think that a lot of people can grow some courage, right, by seeing other brothers step out and just say what's on their mind. And I really appreciate you coming on and just giving us a piece of your mind and your thought process and what masonry is to you. So for that, I'm appreciative, and I'm appreciative again for you from bringing me to a dead level to a living perpendicular as my worshipful master back in the
Yep.
day. So I appreciate you for that, sir. So that's something that will forever resonate with me. So thank you.
LJ, same. I find you one of the most interesting guys in masonry, and I've gotten to travel, I gotten out, I met a lot of guys, and I'll be honest with you, man, nobody thinks like you, and it's a very
Yep.
positive thing. Uh, love you to death, man. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
He's like the old Spice Man,
Man, he is. Yeah, he's like the Dos Equis guy, man. He's like the most
it's
interesting
just a
man.
guy, yeah. No, it's all good, man. Always love, salute, bro. Salute, man. We appreciate you.
Yeah,
Like and
absolutely.
subscribe.
Thank you, gentlemen, for having me on. The reception was well. I don't want to keep going because we can go on for days, but definitely a pleasure knowing you personally. As we've tangibly, or physically know each other. Not to say any weird stuff like that. You know, how people will take something wrong, but just knowing you brothers in the physical, in the present, it's definitely enhanced my experience, and I'm always down to share. But believe me, I definitely get inspiration from you guys, and the conversations are definitely mutual. So I definitely appreciate you having on. It's definitely a well built platform. Questions. You guys are professionals, and definitely exemplifying the characteristics of masonry. So I definitely appreciate you on. And with that, I'll close my mouth and definitely just say I definitely speak blessings upon you and this platform. I hope it's prosperous, both physically and spiritually, mentally, and all things. And that is definitely prosperous because this is a great platform.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. So we stopped it. We stopped the
Okay.
recording, man. It was that's what we want. That content right there is